The second no-no that many of you will probably frown upon is, so it's been a little bit over a year that I've been now shooting on the Sony A7IV, and this has been my main camera for pretty much 90% of all my videos and all my photos. In my opinion, this is the best hybrid camera for the money.
That's a good deal.
If you wanted the more video-centric camera, you have cameras like the Sony A7S III, but they're going to cost you $1,000 more. And if you wanted something even better, but also a hybrid camera, you can now look at the Sony A7R V, but that's going to set you back an extra $1,400 or $1,500. And when the Sony A7IV first came out, there were quite a bit of issues with this camera and some controversy even. And many of these issues revolved around overheating on the camera.
Overheating? Come on, guys.
A7IV does overheat.
And I've been using this camera for a little bit over a year now, and I haven't had any issues whatsoever, and this has been my main camera for both photo and video. I've made a few videos on overheating and how to work around that issue if you have overheating on your camera. So if you haven't seen those videos, I'll link them below. So in today's video, I hope that two of the things that I probably don't do correctly or I probably frown upon can actually benefit you. The first one is shooting in what many people think is the lowest codec or the lowest quality video format on this camera. And that is shooting in the XAVC HS setting. If you're not very familiar with all the video codecs on the Sony A7IV and some of the other newer Sony cameras, we have XAVC HS, XAVC S, and XAVC S-I or XAVC S-All Intra. The HS format gives you the lowest file size while still allowing you to shoot at 4:2 10-bit color. It uses the XAVC codec that has a high compression efficiency. It also uses the long GOP codec, which isn't very friendly for video editing. So if you're using a slower computer, then your video editing software might have a little bit of trouble editing this kind of footage. So in this case, you'll probably need to create proxies first. But if you have a better processor, a better computer, then this usually isn't an issue. The XAVC S format uses a more compatible codec, which is the H.264 codec. And like the HS format, it also has long GOP, but it also lets you shoot in 4:2 10-bit. And the third option is XAVC S-I or All Intra. And this is the highest quality in video that you can get out of the Sony A7IV, but this format also creates the largest file sizes. It uses Intra compression and it's much more friendly when it comes to editing this footage as opposed to long GOP. And the reason why this happens is because Intra compresses the movie frame by frame, whereas long GOP compresses it multiple frames at a time. And because of that, you get better response and flexibility when editing the Intra compression footage as opposed to long GOP, but long GOP has better compression efficiency. So knowing all of these three formats, I rarely shoot in XAVC S-I just because the file sizes are very massive for most of the videos that I shoot. I occasionally will shoot in this format if I have a complex scene that I need to shoot and I want to capture as much detail as possible, or if I'm shooting in 60 frames per second in a very busy scene and I want to also retain as much quality as possible. In the beginning, when I got my Sony A7IV, I started shooting in the XAVC S format because I thought it was the best of both worlds because it was in the middle of both formats. So to me, I thought it was more like the medium option available, the best of both worlds. But I was kind of mistaken. So Sony says this about the HS format. It says that the camera can record movies with higher image quality than XAVC S movies. So as soon as I found that out, then I never shot again in the S format, mostly in the HS video format and in All Intra if I wanted all the quality possible. So knowing this, I shoot almost all my YouTube videos in the XAVC HS format, especially in all the talking head footage like this one, because I tend to record for longer periods of time. And I feel that the HS format gives me the best overall value between video quality and file size when it comes to filming my YouTube videos. Another thing to note too is that in the HS format, you get the choice of shooting at either 50 megabits per second or 100 megabits per second. And I mostly just go for the 50 one because I want smaller file sizes. If you want to shoot, for example, in 420 10-bit or just in 8-bit altogether, you can reduce your file sizes even further. But in my opinion, if you have the Sony A7IV, you want to shoot in 422 10-bit as much as you can, just because of all the color information that you can capture with 422 10-bit. So for myself, I find this to be the best setting for me for my YouTube videos. And things change significantly when I shoot client work as well. HS at 50 megabits per second might not be the first choice in that circumstance. So this is a comparison of each of the codecs available when shooting in 4K on the Sony A7IV. In XAVC S HS 4K at 24 frames per second, and in 422 10-bit, you can shoot at either 50 megabits or 100 megabits per second. In the XAVC S format, also in 4K at 24 frames per second, and in 422 10-bit, you are restricted to 100 megabits per second in your video files. And in the XAVC S-I format, in 4K at 24 frames per second, also at 422 10-bit, you are restricted to 240 megabits per second. Let me know in the comments below which video format you're using. I'd love to hear what your thoughts are. The second no-no that many of you will probably frown upon is shooting under the recommended base ISO in S-Log3.
This is unacceptable.
But before you get upset, Gerald Dunn actually has a video that he put out recently talking exactly just about this. He explains this in so much more detail, so if you're interested or haven't seen that video, I'll leave it in the description below. If you're new to this, if you have no idea what I'm talking about, pretty much your camera has a recommended base ISO depending on the picture profile that you're using. And you know you're under your base ISO when you start to get horizontal bars at the top and at the bottom of your ISO number as you go down. So in S-Log3, the base ISO is 800, but I usually go under that recommended base ISO because the Sony A7IV allows you to do it. In some Sony cameras, you might not be even allowed to go under the base ISO when shooting in a log picture profile. So in situations when I want to keep my shallow depth of field and keep my shutter speed at double that of my frame rate, and I do not have an ND filter, or maybe I'm just too lazy to get an ND filter, then I tend to just lower that ISO under 800 and maybe shoot at anywhere between ISO of 200 to 640. A lot of my YouTube videos this year have been shot with an ISO under 800 in S-Log3. Just for example, this video right now, I'm currently shooting at an ISO of 400. You do lose dynamic range if you shoot under the recommended base ISO, but if you are in a controlled shooting scenario like this one right here, or if you don't really care about capturing the entire dynamic range possible, then you may sometimes just go down and shoot under the base ISO. And again, Gerald Dunn is able to explain this way better than I can, so go check that video out. And don't get me wrong, I don't go under that all the time. It's mostly in scenarios like this one when I'm shooting a YouTube video, or in situations where I know I won't be needing the entire dynamic range. But in certain shooting conditions where you want to retain information in the highlights and also in the shadows as much as you can, then definitely do not go under the recommended base ISO in S-Log3, which is 800. I also don't go under when I'm shooting for a client or for a paid project, but for everything else, social media or YouTube, I tend to go under most of the time nowadays. So let me know in the comments below if you've ever done this no-no, if you ever shot under the base ISO. There's probably many of us out there who are doing it but are not telling anybody, so let's let each other know.
You don't keep it a secret, you understand me?
I hope that you found this educational and informative, and if you enjoyed it, please hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, that is always appreciated. And this is probably going to be my last long-form video of 2022. I do not think I missed an upload this year, maybe one week or 2 weeks, and I'm super stoked that I was able to stay consistent on the channel regardless of the views that I would be getting on certain videos. Have yourself a happy new year and all the best in 2023. I'll see you next time.